Good evening, you beautiful people in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota / Fargo, North Dakota. This is the Vikings Territory breakdown for the 21st of April. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, FranchiseTagged.com, the DraftTeam.com, and a half-empty bed. Real life. I'm joined for the first time on this program by a man who needs little introduction. He's got many nicknames around our Slack, or at least my emails to him. The man, the machine, the MVP, the guy that gets every dream podcast guest that I've ever wanted, even though he's only been doing this for about 6 months, and I've been doing it for what feels like Dustin Baker. Man, how are you doing?
Not bad, sir. So a couple of caveats there. The reason I get all the sweet guests is because of Bryant McKinney. I basically float a name to him, which is a Viking that either played with the team between 2012 or 2002 and 2011, or somebody that went to the University of Miami. He's like, "Oh yeah, I know him. We're buddies." And I have to be careful what I say because he'll have the guest all lined up, and I'm like, "Whoa, we already had somebody slated for next week." And then the caveat about the machine is that my gift, one of the few, is that I write fast. There are significantly better writers out there in the world, but my brain operates fast, and I also have an addictive personality, so it just fits. And yeah, it's cool that you say needs no introduction, because a year ago, 14 months ago, nobody knew who the hell I was.
And look at you now, man. I know who you are. I don't know if that's a good thing for you, but we often talk about that aspect of our collective brains. We did a Zoom call, the first Zoom call we did a couple months ago, where we it felt almost like that scene from Step Brothers, where it was like, did we just become best friends? But it was more creepy than that, I think, because it was like we went to the University of Minnesota at the same time. We both double majored, but we both had one major that we both took classes for at the same time. Probably were in the same classrooms because we were both night class guys, get it out of the way, go once instead of 5 days a week. We even dated the same girl at some point. Maybe there's a set of fraternal twins out there writing and podcasting, one using a lot of commas, the other getting really good guests. But yeah, it's been great working with you, man.
That's the tip of the iceberg. Then there's also the Vikings fandom. There's the political ideological affiliation, and then there is the we're both recovered alcoholics, or at least not recovered alcoholic. I'm not sure if yours is alcohol or drugs.
It's both. I had to beat you at something, man. So
yeah, my story. I've been in recovery or sober now for almost 9 years, and whenever I tell my story, I always say that I never had the courage to do drugs because, first of all, alcohol made me feel like a superhero, and that was all I needed. That's all I needed. And for me, I never wanted to be discovered as an alcoholic, and I therefore thought that if I dabbled into the stuff that you evidently did, then people could criticize me. But I thought in my twisted brain that so long as all I did was get drunk in excess every night, nobody would bother me. After a while, I bothered myself, and I had to change. But yeah, so that's like 8 parallels that are really spooky.
And I've been sober for 9 years too, but the difference there for me was I was bad at doing it at home alone because as people may have picked up on, one or two times a month where I go into the comment section and lay the hammer down on somebody that says something that bothers me. I'm a confrontational person by nature, and so a lot of people were like, you got to pump the brakes on drinking. And so I said, I know the win-win solution there. I'll just take some Vicodin. There's no drawback from it, no hangover, there's no Facebook, I'm not telling my great aunt to go to hell for some reason. and you know the rest of the story there. So yeah, man, it's always fun to work with like-minded people and people that have similar life experiences, good or bad. You know, it frames kind of the biggest addiction in our lives, which is the Vikings, which I don't really see what we get out of it, to be honest, at this point. But I should also introduce our second guest for the day. Back by popular demand, you were on actually the last 2 weeks because last week we replayed the episode you were on the week before. People are just falling in love with Josh up in the northern Minnesota area, Mr. Josh Frey.
There we go.
Got it. Uh, he is the senior writer for basically all of our sites at this point, VikingsTerritory, PurplePTSD.com. He's one of the head honchos over at the DraftTeam.com, or he was before he heard my life story and then started putting his resume on Indeed. How you doing?
Is he a drunk?
Yeah.
He's not a drunk? Not a drunk or not a drunk yet?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't have any of the life stories to share with you guys yet, but I mean, I'm feeling kind of left out over here at this point.
You're normal. Okay, I got you. You're like my who drinks a beer and then she's like, "Yeah, I'm good," and I'm like, "What? Why?"
How does that work? You guys get excited for the draft or what? Or are you at the point where you're kind of? And I want to start this question with Dustin because you got a lot going on, man, and we'll talk about your site here in a second. But you've been covering basically every mock draft that pertains to the Vikings for the last couple weeks, and Josh, you have too. But do you feel like you're still excited for the draft? I mean, I'm sure you are, but are you also kind of just ready for this thing to happen at this point?
I mean, if it was bumped up to tonight, miraculously, I'd be down for it. But no, I love this time of year, and the difference between 2 years ago and now is that I didn't write about it, but I still followed it to the utmost. I still read the same mock drafts and formulated my own opinions in my brain. I just didn't share them with anybody because I didn't think anybody cared. But now I have a platform to, spew all of the knowledge and explain why so and so will or will not go to the team. So yeah, I'm have the utmost excitement for it. I'm even going to it. About 2 weeks ago, I saw that it's free to get in. Few people know that. You can go to the draft, and even when there's not a pandemic, you can go and be a part of the full experience.
I didn't know
This
that.
year, it's kind of it's always free. It's always a huge party, and you just have to sign up. Be the first to sign up. So they came out with the regulations that said, hey, if you're vaccinated, if you're willing to distance, you can sign up for these phases. Like they had, I think all the stuff on night 1 is booked. And then round 2 was wide open. Day 3 was wide open. So I looked at my wife and said, we're both going to be vaccinated. Do you want to go to Cleveland? And she was like, hesitant because it was like,
Cleveland,
are we allowed that stuff? And she was like, well, let me look at it. And we both checked with our managers at our daytime jobs, and it was a go. And for our honeymoon, we went to Niagara Falls 4 years ago, and to get there, we had to fly into Cleveland. So we have sentimental ties to it as well. And people always joke about how nasty Cleveland is and all that, and I just don't understand it. It may not be as sizzling or as sexy
by the lake.
Yeah, as like Manhattan or something, but there's nothing wrong with Cleveland. So yeah, I'm gonna go. It sounds like you're working on trying to get me some sort of press pass, but it'll be fun to be there and then also communicate to the folks what's going on.
And when you say like day 1 is there's no availability, but day 2 and 3, what does that pertain to? Like, are there?
Oh, you go into the One Pass app you download it from your Play Store, and it tells you the slots. You get like 2 or 3 hour slots. So by the time I got there, night number 1 was booked. But then I got the second round in the morning, and then I created an account for my wife and got the day 3 so we could go twice. I think normally you can do that and be there, be one of the idiots in the crowd like I wanted to be, where you're screaming and proclaiming the pick is awesome, even if you never heard of the guy. But this year, I think in-theater attendance is limited to agents, players, and family. But they've also teased that perhaps they'll let some folks in. I don't know how that works, but just being there in the building will be quite sweet. And we're anxious to travel now that we're vaccinated, and we'll still be responsible with masks and everything. But it's a beautiful fit to get us out of the house finally.
Yeah, man, I'm a little jealous. It's gonna be, I mean, irregardless, it'll be good for the network. It'll be good, especially for the two new sites, FranchiseTagged.com and theDraftTeam.com, that you're there. But I have a strong feeling. I use whatever equity I have, which who knows how much equity I actually do have, considering my articles about Mike Zimmer every week. But I don't think they're going to have that many people actually there that are requesting press passes. If I learned anything from the Vikings, it's that they have and the NFL too, they kind of look down their nose at online-only entities unless those online-only entities are nationally focused. Joe Oberle, who does the show regularly, used to have a press pass when I first started working with him through a site called The Sports Post, which was national, but no one had ever heard of. It went out of business right after the Super Bowl in Minneapolis, but Joe had a press pass in the Super Bowl, at it. And so I have a very strong feeling that you're going to get some access there. And then, maybe we'll get some, call-in access on a local level, but people should really stay tuned to both of those sites, every day moving forward, but especially as we build up to the draft. And I thought it'd be cool to have you on now that, Franchise Tagged has started, and we're hiring all sorts of people to join. And, I think one of the ways that you really kind of put it, introducing yourself, is that you used to cover the team 2 years ago, let's say. You had all these thoughts, probably posted them on Twitter or on any number of social media channels. Some people do it on Facebook or in Facebook groups. Some people go to Reddit and post these really great self-posts on Reddit, deep dive stuff. And that's fine, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I always approach those people who I can tell kind of have a knack for coming up with concepts that aren't just spoon-fed from other articles, and communicating their point of view, and arguing in a way that shows that they can communicate what they're thinking. And I go to those people and say, well, do you want to make money doing that? Whether it's as a hobby or as a potential career. And that's how I've had a lot of luck with hiring guys like you. I mean, Josh came to us through a job application, but Kirby I found on Reddit, and I just saw you on Twitter and saw you arguing with somebody, Dustin, rather harshly, but professionally, which is kind of where I get lost. In the midway point, it's just why I don't do it. And I was like, man, this guy's good. And so then I reached out to you, and I was like, you should write for us. And you were like, who's this dude? This sounds way too good to be true. And so I think you nailed it when you said that. And so, we're always looking for help. We're always looking for people. Franchise Tagged is our biggest site yet. It's an NFL site. The draft team needs draft heads, mini ice if you like talking about the NHL, the Minnesota Wild, hockey in general. We need a ton of people for that. And so people can always just go to the website, click on contact us, and submit a resume and find us that way. But I thought it'd be cool, Dustin, if you could kind of go through Franchise Tagged, what it's all about, how it's different, why you think people might like it.
Oh, absolutely. I'll do that, and then I'll give you a little mini draft prediction before I got to hop off. You guys are still hearing me, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. With Vikings territory and purple PTSD, back in November, I started to have a phobia that I was going to run out of topics just basically to suffice my appetite, because back then I thought, God, there's only one thing I can write for per day. So I needed another idea. And I thought, well, if I could just write about the whole NFL, because naturally I follow all of that, whether it's watching the games or playing fantasy football, I just know all of this stuff. So I came to Joe and said, hey, can we build a national website? And he said, yeah, I think we can. And I said, let's call it the NFL Trend Zone. And we were going to do that, and we figured out that had already been purchased. So we pivoted to FranchiseTagged, and that was available. And yeah, I wanted a place to write about all things NFL. And I knew that my story, the ascension to being a voice, was really cool, but it didn't have to be exclusive to me. So I started finding men and women that followed the sport, can write, and said, hey, send me about 150 words of how you write. And if I like it, then we're going to sign you up. And then I've done that to the tune of about, I think it's 16, 17 men and women right now, and it's growing. And it is a open place. I let people pick their own topics, so long as they're not like, blah, blah, blah is my favorite player, and here's why. I don't want that stuff.
Yeah.
I want to know, who are the power rankings of the best receivers in the AFC East? And if you can explain to me why, bada bing, you can write all about that. And that's unique to us because even though I've only been doing this for a little bit of time, before I met Joe, at other entities, I had to submit to what I wanted to write about and hope that it would get approved. And that would usually take about 3 or 4 hours. And then by that time, my zeal for the topic had moved on, and I wanted to be able to have creative control. So therefore, I thought, how I can give this to others. They can come up with the topic, and when they build a rapport with me, I'm just going to let them run. I'll go in there and edit it and make sure that what they've written is appropriate and grammatically sound. I'll assign a picture to the article and a catchy headline, and we're good to go. So Joe built that website. It's been off and running for about 6 weeks. Conveniently, it started like 3 days before free agency hit, so it was perfect timing there. Yeah. And I think that our folks love the flexibility of it. And it's cool because it's men and women, all ages, all colors. Some of them are in college who do it, when they're done with their homework and all that. And I can always tell when there's a lull in people's lives because they start rapid fire sending over articles, which I'm here all about. But I do have to hop off in a few minutes, so I presume you guys are going to talk about the draft. I don't know if I'll be on before the draft again, but I do firmly believe that Rick Spielman will trade the 14th pick about between 4 and 8 spots backward. And then that'll get back into the second round to make amends for the Yannick Ngakoue trade. And then the Vikings will take whichever trenchman, offensive line or defensive line, is best available and go forth. And the only reason I say that is because Spielman is absolutely impeccable in the second round. He, since he took over the big job in 2012, he's never had a miss. He's had, players that are decent, like Mackenzie Alexander, but the rest of them are Dalvin Cooks, Brian O'Neill's, Eric Kendricks. It just speaks for itself. So I think if I know that, he should know that. And I believe that they will trade the pick, which most people think, and then they'll have picks in all rounds besides the 7th, which was stripped. What do you guys think?
Josh?
Oh, yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised either if the Vikings trade down from that 14 spot. It makes a lot of sense, especially given the talent in that first round of the draft this year. I think later in the round, a lot of offensive linemen are going to start to go, and that's obviously a need that the Vikings have. I think Elijah Vera Tucker is a really interesting prospect that the Vikings could end up taking if they end up trading out of 14. And I mean, even if they stay at 14, there's going to be plenty of guys there that you could argue have plenty of value along the offensive line. So yeah, I think trading out of that spot is a really great move for them.
Yeah, I've always hoped that's what they would do. Throughout the mocks, especially the national mocks, saying, well, the Vikings might trade to 9 to get Sewell or something. They're not going to do that. We all know that Spielman loves trading down in general and amassing a ton of picks. We all also know that offensive guards don't usually end up being taken at 14 or anywhere near that unless there's some sort of Steve Hutchinson level guaranteed stud. So I think it makes a lot of sense to do that if you're looking to especially to shore up the interior of the offensive line. And so that would make me happy. The last thing I want is, Dustin, I think you covered. I want to double check it. It was you, but the quote from Zimmer that was someone reminded everybody of on Purple PTSD the other day. Basically, Zimmer saying, courtesy of free agency, now we can take the best player available in the draft, and it's like, oh no. Because the best player available in Zimmer's mind is always going to be a corner. It wouldn't matter if we had a jugs machine at quarterback and 7 first-rounders at the position. He could find a way to justify drafting another corner. And so I wanted to actually ask Josh about his thoughts on the best player available philosophy of team building through the draft. But no, I couldn't. I actually agree with you, both of you guys, that I think that's what they should do and what they're going to do. But we shall see. I don't know. I'm very, very worried about this draft, and it raises a lot of interesting questions. And before I get into that, I wanted to thank you, Dustin, for stopping by, and to remind people to check out Dustin's amazing Believe in Vikings podcast that he hosts with Mr. Bryant McKinney. That gets posted on our site, VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com every Wednesday. He also does an NFL Trend Zone podcast you can find there as well, or a podcast page. You can find whichever platform that it's on and subscribe to it there. But thanks again to the machine, Dustin.
Absolutely. And in parting, when we hear it allows them to take the best player available, I think most of us would think, well, that means Micah Parsons or Devonta Smith or Trey Lance if they fall. Well, yes, I agree. That would probably be their version of it when it would be a corner or something that leaves you scratch your head. But in their defense, and then I promise I'll get off here, they don't really do a lot of weird things, a la the Raiders or forgetting to make the pick 15 years ago. They're pretty good about being competent. So, all right, gentlemen, take it easy.
Later, man.
See you, Dustin.
Where do you fall on that philosophy of best player available versus player of need? I do feel that it is even... The best way to ask this, I guess, is just to explain where my brain is on it. I don't know if there's... obviously, it varies from team to team and year to year, but I don't know, specifically if there's ever been a full 7-round draft where a team has specifically taken best player available at every single spot. It's also kind of hard to determine the variables going into that and what the thought process is. But I've never been a really big fan of best player available unless you have a situation in which, let's say, the 2019 Vikings roster on defense was stacked almost at every single position. The offense had talent everywhere, save for the offensive line. So let's say the offensive line was stacked too. Then you could say, okay, let's take best player available, whatever it may be, because we just have so much depth and quality everywhere else that it's kind of, why not have the riches get richer? But when it comes to a team like the Vikings that has had just this Achilles heel for as long as I can remember, at least as long as I've been covering the team for Purple PTSD or Vikings Territory, I get a little miffed when it's just like, it's the same thing over and over again. And granted, they have used some higher picks on Garrett Bradbury, Brian O'Neill, but I don't know if they're identifying talent the right way for what makes a good pro offensive lineman. I don't know, but I'm not a huge fan of the best player available situation, especially when it comes to the Vikings, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that as well. I think most of the time a team needs to definitely draft by need. I think the Vikings fall under that category this year, obviously. I will say, if it's a guy that is going to be a great NFL talent, I say throw need out the window. For example, if Kyle Pitts is available at 14, I think the Vikings need to throw need out the window and just take him because he's about as sure a thing at tight end as you're going to get in this draft. And I think he's an all-pro talent. at some point in his career, and I think he's a guy that comes in on day one and just immediately makes an impact for your team. So in that case,
who would you compare him to in the league?
I think honestly, Travis Kelce's a really good comp, but because his blocking ability, it's not great yet, but it's still something that he's able to do at least.
Yep.
In bits and pieces here, but he's just such a dynamic receiver, and I think he can add so much to an offense immediately.
I actually really don't take in that pick. Obviously, I still would take a plug-and-play offensive lineman, but there's a lot historically in terms of identifying offensive linemen that haven't panned out for this team that I am still a little reticent. I don't know. I just feel like, they kind of get lost in the definition of what makes a good zone blocking offensive lineman. Also includes the ability to win one-on-one battles and push guys off the ball, and it doesn't seem like our guys do a lot of that. And their footwork is sloppy. The vision on the field is bad. So on and so forth. And so, I'm not super bullish on whoever they end up taking into this system working out. I mean, I wish they would just bring Josh Klein back, but as a Cleveland at least left guard, and then maybe draft a left tackle. But there's just a lot of issues there from the different either NFL offensive line coaches or former players, some that played under Zimmer, some that didn't, who have all given me similar feedback that essentially there's a lot of talent on the line, but they just seem lost and uncoached. And so that's a concern. So to mitigate that issue, I've been talking a lot the last few weeks on Bob Sansevier's show, the BS show, every Monday, and he's really enamored with the top three receivers, and he thinks that the Vikings should take, one of those guys, namely Smith, because then you would have this trio of receivers that you can dump the ball off to, and they can create, from any level of the field. From looking at a tight end position, though, I think Irv Smith Jr. showed some flashes of greatness this last season. He had some good grabs. I don't necessarily think he's come out looking like a super T1 fantasy football stud yet. As everyone knows, the Kubiak system is predicated on two tight ends, but that doesn't always mean, or it's actually rarely meant that two tight ends get any number of balls that you can really quantify into anything. They're just relevant for blocking and stuff. So I think if you could lock in a guy that even would be a poor man's Kelsey, could be huge for a team that just lost a guy in Kyle Rudolph who was basically automatic in the end zone. I think that you can make a lot worse moves than that, and I like that move.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it'd be a really great red zone target, because I get why people would like to see a wide receiver in that pick if one does fall, like Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, somebody like that. But I just don't think that they're the immediate red zone target that Kyle Pitts is. Like, we saw all last year and the years prior that he is just an absolute monster, especially down in that area. And like you said, no Kyle Rudolph anymore. Those targets are going to be up for grabs for a lot of the year. So it's going to be up to somebody to step up and take them.
Yeah, and Cousins' red zone and infrared zone stats these last couple of years are insane. 36 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not all of that is Kyle Rudolph, obviously, but I think that's a really good point. That's a kind of a glaring omission that a lot of people are overlooking when it comes to the state of the roster right now. Granted, Adam Thielen turned into Chris Carter Jr. with, all he does is catch touchdowns this last season. There's going to be more of that this year, but that's a really good pick. I really do like that one, and I really feel like, to be honest with you, man, the defense, depending on what happens with Danielle Hunter, it will be better.
Absolutely.
The Gladney thing sucks, but it isn't as bad as maybe losing Dancer would have been, or someone else. They have at least some mitigation there with Patrick Peterson coming in and being 30 years old. I'm sure they'll find a corner at some point before the fourth round. Mike Hughes might be able to come back healthy and actually earn an extension or something, but or his fifth-year deal. But I always felt that this team, to actually become a legitimate contender, needs to put together an elite offense. And I feel like if they're able to just put together a mediocre offensive line that can pass protect a little bit, I mean, look how close they were to being an elite unit last year after the bye. I mean, it was almost by design that they weren't, because there were games where they did throw a ball over 20 yards until like the 38th, 39th minute. They really wanted to control the clock and dink and dunk and have these 10 to 12 play drives, so the opposing team's offenses were on the sidelines. And you would think getting these guys back healthy and then some of the pieces they picked up in free agency, that won't necessarily be the case as much. I know Zimmer's very risk averse anyway, so I don't expect him to come out like the greatest show on turf or anything. But this offense is ready to be elite right now, and that's raised an interesting question that I'm working on an article about that'll probably be ready at some point tonight or tomorrow. But a lot of people have had mocks where Justin Fields or Trey Lance might fall to 14, and what do you do as Zimmer and Spielman, and what would the fan base do? And I want to get your opinion on that, but I do think that the argument that I have that they would trade down there, or take another player if they felt that player wouldn't be available, depending on who they'd be trading with, is that I think Zimmer, maybe Spielman, are cognizant enough of their job security, let's say, right now, to know that they can't draft a quarterback to sit on the bench for a year, because they need to win and at least make the playoffs this year. And that you could do both, or you could say, look, I got this young stud quarterback of the future, just give me more time. But I think that Zimmer's been given more time, and there's been rate of return has gotten worse. So I think they would make a more, I don't want to call it a selfish move, because I think it would be better for the franchise, because I don't think Cousins is the problem. But I don't see them making a move in the first round that doesn't immediately impact the 2021 team on the field, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, not only does it not affect 2021, and like Spielman and Zimmer might be out of a job by the time that Fields actually took up the offense, the reins of the offense. But I mean, I feel like we know enough to this point that they trust Cousins. They wouldn't have given him that extension if they didn't believe that he was a good enough quarterback to get the job done. So I don't think there's really any world where the Vikings are thinking, oh, let's wait and see if Fields falls, then we can snag him with that first round pick. That just feels like a waste of a pick when you need to win right now.
Yeah, and it does. It's very Vikingsy though, because he could end up being one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, and the timing's never right for the Vikings to land these young quarterbacks when they need them. It's just either we're not bad enough to get them, or it just isn't in the cards when it happens. I mean, I know we kind of talked about this before, but what are your thoughts on, for those who didn't listen last time, on Fields versus like Lance? I mean, would you put, after Lawrence, how would you stack up these other quarterbacks, the BYU guys?
Right now, I think I'd go Fields number 2, just because I feel like he's proven enough at this point at Ohio State and in big games that he's a good quarterback going into this draft. And then I think I'd put Lance at 3 right now. I know he's not super proven it or anything. Like, he played 17 games in college and he played in FCS competition. So, I mean, but there's also something to be said about him going 16-0 and running through that competition that he actually had to play against. And I mean, he was super accurate at North Dakota State. He's a great dual threat in the pocket. He's something that a lot of NFL teams look for at the quarterback position nowadays, and it's easy to make a scheme around that. So I'd put him above both Wilson and Jones at this point. Obviously, it may depend on what sort of system that Jones and Wilson find themselves in, and they could prove to be better pros more down the line. But as of right now, I'd take Lance.
Yeah, I would do. But you would get all the. Well, that's a downside though. North Dakota people flood the state.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm cool. I'm kidding because we're on air in Fargo, so there goes our billboard, I guess. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be an interesting draft. I'm incredibly nervous about it. You know, I don't really know what's going to happen, and I don't think it surprises most people that I don't know typically. I mean, I always found it kind of funny where like you have a guy like Mel Kiper, or I forget the name of the guy for NFL Network that does it, um, and they'll sit there and they'll go on and on like the 4 minutes and say like they're definitely going to be taking Mac Jones with this pick, and then it'll be like, and with the third pick, San Francisco takes Justin Fields, and then it's well, no, it's Mac Jones, and then all of a sudden it's someone. You know, it's like they're so adamant, and then they're wrong, and then they just wash their hands of it. It's actually good comedy if you watch it because you can see the sweat beads get bigger as the show goes on. But you did something that's very brave, in my opinion, a recent 3-round mock draft. I think you've only posted the first round though, or
I posted the second round this
too.
morning.
Okay, so if you want to give a couple spoilers away, what did you find? Let's say from a Vikings perspective, where did you end up? I will say as a hint, if I'm obviously all offensive line, right? But I'm also, as I've said on every show, and I have to, so my dad doesn't hit me with a switch, a big Big Ten guy. And so if there's any move that would make some sense to me, it'd be an edge player. And if that edge player came from the Big Ten, I would be ecstatic. And so clearly I'm talking about Kwity Paye, who a lot of people have linked to the Vikings these last couple of weeks. And we kind of touched on that on your last appearance as well. But it looks like he ended up kind of falling right to where we need him. Do you really think that the Vikings, you know, based off of what Dustin said earlier about trading down, do you think if Kwity Paye is available, they'll take him, or would that change their mind on trading down? I guess would be a different way to ask since we talked about this last time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if Paye is there at 14, like, listen, there's going to be a ton of guys that fall out of the top 10 that we're saying are going to go in the top 10 just because the sheer number of the guys that we're saying are going to go that high. So if Kwity Paye does fall that far, I feel like they will stay put and just take him because they just have a lot of other draft picks to work with. And who knows, they can still package some of those later rounds to get into the second and third round again. So it's not like they're going to be wasting all these picks on non-quality players. So I'll just say the draft's not going to be over after night one. Like, even if they don't fix the offensive line night one, there's still plenty of time for them to do so later on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this draft, and I'm seeing Wyatt Davis at 23. That would
that'd be a good pickup.
Yeah, I mean that would make me want to trade down and grab him. You know, I don't know how good do you think he is? I'm really bullish on him. I just get the sense that you could just plug him in and then you'd be set for the next 10 years and not really have to worry about it. You know, like a Neo Steve Hutchinson situation. I know he had some semblance of an injury, but that seems to be a non-factor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty high on especially offensive linemen coming out of the Big Ten because they're just really big guys that have born and raised in the Midwest. They drink their milk every day, so
Yeah.
so they're gonna be quality NFL players. So I think Wyatt Davis is gonna be at least one of the top guards to come out of this draft, and I mean it would be a great move for the Vikings to do it. But am I convinced that that's actually something that they're looking at doing right now? Recent history might say no.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a sigh of part of my will to live just left my body.
Yeah, I
um,
think a lot of people in Minnesota are probably feeling that right now.
I would love Rashawn Slater. I feel like his stock just keeps going up every time I check. And so yeah, I mean, but you have Kyle Pitts going sixth, so if he were to fall to 14, I could totally see the Vikings need one of those sort of new age tight ends that are just like really, really big wide receivers, that can do everything and that can
hmm
create separation. I mean, Kyle Rudolph caught 80% of the balls he threw his way, but he
He's
did
just
not.
not a super athletic guy.
No, he just plodded along like he was 70 years old. And it would have been fine maybe if he broke tackles, but he tried that earlier in his career and he got injured all the time. So he would, someone would blow on him and he'd just go down. So it's one of the worst of both worlds. Outside of he had spectacular hands. Um, Kind of opens up the second round of your mock, and I'm assuming that unless you had the Vikings trade in somehow, that they weren't
No, I
involved.
didn't have them in the second. No.
That's a that's a brave thing to do. It's the most realistic thing to do. Also, um, I want to look at then your take on Rashad Bateman. Um, who obviously a lot of people around the state of Minnesota are looking at, and some people thought would be a first round pick. When he a year ago. Um, do you, I know you kind of positioned it that way. In that if he were to fall to I think like 35 or 36 because it's Miami, I think
Yep.
it would be a steal. Um, what are your thoughts on Bateman in general, and as he compares to some of these other uh, wide receivers that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, so obviously his 2020 season wasn't that great. But and I think he saw a lot of his stock fall after the immediate after effects of that season. But I think people started looking at the old tape again, 2018, 2019, and they started to come back around and realize, hey, this guy's got a lot of talent. Like he didn't show it all the time in 2020. He had a few lack of focus drops, but the dude's still a really good receiver. I don't think he's quite to the talent of like the top tier, like Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, or any of those guys. But I do think he's in that next group of guys that are going to go in the late first round, early second, that are going to step into a team as either a wide receiver two or a slot receiver and just catch the ball, make an impact on the team.
Yeah, a lot of people have been pointing to the aforementioned receivers with the Vikings. Snagging one of them in the first round. I've always thought like, well, if they wanted to trade down, pick up Bateman just for the jersey potential by itself, and then shore up the offensive line or do something. I would be all about that. Um, I don't know.
That
I
would be
still
fun. Yeah. You
I,
definitely
I,
sell out the stadium.
do you feel like we are going to have some semblance of what's going on with Daniil Hunter before the draft? Or I mean, I guess if we did it before the draft, we would know for sure after the draft. based on some of the moves they're making. But I feel like unless I missed something, and I've been moving all week, so it could be a very strong possibility. It just seems like there's not a lot there that we've really read or heard about, and it's a little disconcerting, and it should kind of determine a lot of things coming up.
It's super interesting because we heard that first report and then it kind of just died off right away. There hasn't really been anything else, so we're kind of just sitting here hanging, waiting to see what's going to happen. I don't really know if the draft's going to tell us much because like they could draft an edge rusher early on, but I feel like they do that even if Danielle Hunter was coming back. So I don't know if that's really going to do much to tell what's happening with that situation. I think it'll be closer to training camp before we actually figure out what's actually going on there.
Never a dull moment, man.
I know, yeah.
It's just like, do you remember that fun, 3 days before the season started? It was the weekend before the week of the first game. And
that was my first days with you guys.
Yeah, what a great time to join. We all thought, oh my God, Ngakoue, Danielle Hunter, Anthony Barr,
crazy,
Eric Kendricks, Anthony Harris. You're basically 2 All-Pros at every, or at least elite guys on each level of your defense, and you had some young corners, but you figured you have these pass rushers to help mitigate that, and then it's just that never came to fruition. It just was very. If there's been a blunder in Spielman's operating of this team outside of perhaps hiring Zimmer in general, it was that trade and then just moving on from him a couple weeks later for less than what you got. I mean, why not just keep him?
The trade away didn't make much sense to me at all. I mean, I'm not going to blame him too much for bringing him in because, I mean, you can't really control the fact that Hunter and Barr both got hurt immediately after that happened. So I feel like it still could have been a really great success if those guys had stayed healthy. The trade away was weird, but I mean, I guess I get you're probably not going to re-sign him, so you might as well get whatever draft capital you can get.
Don't you think if he would have played a little bit longer and he would have had an outsized role on the defense more so than he's had anywhere else, maybe it would have inflated his value a little bit more? I don't know.
Yeah, you're probably right. Trading him at that point didn't make much sense. I mean, I think we're pretty much in agreement there, but yeah, I don't know, man.
It's very strange. But point being, it's going to be an interesting draft. I don't know. I have this weird feeling that something weird's going to happen. I just
me too.
I don't see what's in front of us as being what's going to be in front of us for very long. It should make for really, exciting fodder and content. And so we'll be, over on the draft team, especially. We'll be doing a lot of draft stuff across all of our football sites, FranchiseTagged.com, thedraftteam.com, PTSD.com, and VikingsTerritory.com. Initially, the hope was that we're developing this app and we're kind of rebranding our parent company to be called UFFda Sports, and it's going to aggregate and be the central location for all of the websites that we have and then partner websites that we work with, like Vikings Gazette or Vikings 61, or 10K Takes MN, who we recently signed up with this week, who does a lot of really, really good TikTok and YouTube and Twitch stuff that's all sports based, and it has a lot of social media features is what I'm getting at. When we were hoping to do a live marathon 5-hour, let's watch the draft together, everyone can comment as we sit and watch it together, me, you, Kirby, special guests, but apparently apps are complicated, and so it's taking a little bit longer than I initially planned, so it should be ready, I would say, within by June 1st. We're just hammering out some details, but
every small speed bump actually just is good news, and I'll explain it to people once it's here, because we're just adding more functionality and integration, and it's really going to blow people's minds. We're really hoping people like it. It's if you like talking about sports, reading about sports, listening or watching shows about sports, it's going to have everything you want. It's going to let you talk about them in every way that you like. So stay tuned for that. But we will be doing a lot of draft team stuff for the draft. That'll kind of be the figurehead of that, and then we'll be disseminating all of that content through our other websites. And so definitely follow Mr. Josh on Twitter at Fried Chicken 05. That's FREYED Chicken 05. You can find the draft team at _draft_team on Twitter, or just the draft team, all one word, on Facebook. You can find me, Mr. Joey Johnnerbean, at VTPTSD. Dustin is at Dust Baker, and he runs FranchiseTagged.com, which you can find on Twitter and Facebook as well. But I wanted to thank you again, Mr. Frey. Did it again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. But no, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate your insight. I really like working with you. I'm really excited to show people all this crazy stuff we're working on. And so let's attack the draft. And I'll be the Bill Piper who looks in the camera, very sure of myself, and chooses a kicker, and it's the first round. Nope. And we'll have fun doing that about a week from now. But thanks again for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's gonna be a fun week.
Yeah, fun. That's the best way to put it. Interesting, fun, potentially disastrous for the team. We shall find out. Thank you to everybody in Detroit Lakes and Fargo for listening to the show. We hope you like it. You can find it on basically every podcast platform known to man. Just type in the Vikings Territory Breakdown podcast on Google, and you will find it. And share it with your friends. It would mean a lot to us. Alrighty, we will check in with you next week on KDLM Sports Radio. This has been the Vikings Territory Breakdown for the 21st of April.